All right. So we're recording. I'm here with my good friend and someone that I respect. I respect your opinions a lot, man. So I'm
Thank you.
excited for this. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, just as a little bit of background, you have kind of an interest in economics, I would say. So, and also kind of a unique perspective on supply chains and things like that. So,
Yeah,
it's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about today. So, I have the
awesome.
free version of Zoom, so I only have a limited amount of time. So I'll just start right off with the questions, if that's okay with you.
Good with me.
All right, man. So here we find ourselves. What day is it today? Yeah, October 25th, 2022. We see ourselves in kind of a recession. Although I don't know if we're fully meeting those metrics yet, but definitely a downturn in the economy. And just as a guy who studies economics, I want to know to what extent do you think the government really has control over what's going on right now, and how much influence they have over the current economy. And then furthermore, I would be interested to know, in your opinion, how much do you think they should have control over that?
I mean, the government, I would say, has like fairly large control over the economy. Um, just the way that they can enact bills and things like that. But what's interesting about the Fed that I think is, I'm not sure if you're also asking about the Fed or not, but
Yes,
the
yes.
Fed, they really only have three things that they can do, which is raise rates, lower rates, or threaten to do one of those two things. And that's really the only power that they have. And I think that recently giving them a little bit more power, like if they had more power, I think that they could have done more to stop inflation. But at the same time, I think it's a good thing that they don't have a lot of power, you know?
Yeah. And so what are some of the things do you think we'll start to see when it's time to bring the economy back up?
I
What
think
are some telltale signs from, say, let's say the Fed, and more broadly just the government in general? What kind of things should we be looking out for to see if we're kind of reaching an inflection point in the macro?
well, as we normally see, like lowering of rates and the ramping down of everything, the government releasing less from the strategic oil reserves. But a metric that I thought was really interesting that I heard about in the past month or two is the substitution that normal consumers do, which is where you go into the store looking for Kraft mac and cheese or something, and you end up getting the generic brand because it's cheaper. And Walmart, Target, Kroger, all of the major chains, all the places that sell groceries and like normal commodities in the past 2 months reported a really big uptick in consumers going more for the generic brand. And that was like what, a few months back that I heard that. And that's when I was like, oh, we're going into a recession because people don't like to buy those generic brands. And like for people to make the switch across the board in all products, I think is a really big telltale sign. It's one of
Yeah,
those smaller signs of like a bigger
like strip
inflation.
clubs.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Yeah. There was
and
another one that I heard, but I can't remember.
there's something interesting that I heard on a podcast, where this guy he was talking about inflation, and he was saying, if you spend $25,000 on a basket of goods, and that basket of goods then becomes $35,000, well, you're still going to spend $25,000 on just in total for that year because that's all you have to spend. You can't necessarily be spending more, and you may even spend less, is what he was saying, because of the fear of inflation. So it was interesting to hear that perspective, and then also to think about, all this talk about inflation. Are we close to the top of inflation? Because he was also saying that once you start hearing all these people talk about the price of oil or the price of gas, rather, that's usually a top for oil. So I think it'll be interesting to see within the next, say, year or so, kind of how that plays out. My guess is as good as yours, I guess, with these big macro things. It's all really opinion, but
Yeah, I feel like I don't, we might be at the top in terms of like how high it's going to get. But I think that we're going to see a decrease in like inflation and in prices, but I think it's going to come back up.
you
Like
think the prices are gonna come up back
yeah,
up?
I don't know if they're going to reach the height that we're currently seeing, but
Hmm.
I do think that it's going to kind of fall and then come back up because that's just like the way things have been going the past year or two. Like oil prices will skyrocket for a few months and they start coming back down. And it's like things reach a new floor. And I think what a lot of places, like a lot of companies, are realizing is that the consumers adjust faster nowadays, and so they get more used to those high prices quicker. So when things do go down, I don't think they're going to go down as much as we saw like a year or two ago.
Okay. Yeah, that
I
makes
think
sense.
we're to a certain level, we're like at a new price floor.
Okay. And then, so another question I kind of had for you is, and this kind of plays into what we're talking about, but throughout all this inflation and the prices going up, we've seen nothing but strength in the U.S. dollar. So where do you think that's coming from? And where do you think that'll end up in kind of the long term in let's say around 5 years?
I am not 100% sure where it's coming from. I think that a lot of it is everything the government's been doing to, prop up the market and things like that to kind of decrease the shocks that we would feel. But also, I think that like so prior to 2008, there was a few like fledgling economies like in Southeast Asia that were kind of like starting out on their own, like their economy started to grow, and then they had currency issues. And I forget what the two countries were. I think one of them might have been Malaysia or something, but there was a lot of investment flowing into those countries, and then their currency became really unstable. And when that happens in a country, people take their money out and put it back into the US,
Okay.
if that makes sense, because the US is considered the stable
Right.
asset market. And I think that that's kind of what we're seeing right now. That would be my guess,
Yeah.
is because there's so much turmoil going on in, Iran, Russia, like Ukraine, Taiwan, even. We're seeing a lot more people being like, I don't want to put my money out there. I want to put it back in the US. Because the US can be unstable, but it's more of a known commodity.
Right. And people are maybe willing to eat that inflation at whatever it is, 8%. That they calculate that into their investment and in terms of risk, because even we're seeing within the last couple of days with China, people don't really feel comfortable having a bunch of money overseas in
Mm-hmm.
certain countries, and we're seeing that all over. And I guess, to me it just makes me kind of wonder, as a crypto guy, I guess, what happens, because it seems like the dollar, the money will consolidate in the dollar, but that
Mm-hmm.
just because we're the strongest economy doesn't mean our currency is going to hold up forever. So it'll be interesting kind of to see how that plays out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So here's just to switch paces a little bit and talk a little bit about supply chain with you. I know that
Mm-hmm.
you deal with that on a day-to-day basis. So a lot of the supply chain that you're dealing with is from China, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And
pretty much
and
everything is.
pretty much everything. Yeah.
Go ahead.
And so do you see a reality in which there could be manufacturing moving back to the US, or has that ship just completely sailed?
I think it depends on the industry. I think there are a few industries, namely like more tech-based stuff, that I think the government is trying to bring back into the US more. So I do think that we're going to see that um, come back to the US more. But like apparel, like more commodity things, I think we're going to see stay over in China. It's just materials are so cheap, everything's already set up out there, labor is so cheap. And during the pandemic, when everything was so hard to get from overseas, a lot of like fabric based things moved into Mexico
Hmm.
because you you just drive it up
Right.
as opposed to going on a boat. And so I think that whatever little did come back to North America, it went to like Mexico and South America where the labor is cheaper and land's cheaper.
Okay, yeah. So that's something that I was thinking of too is yeah, we have the chips. The government is kind of making
Mm-hmm.
an attempt to move the chips manufacturing back to the United States from for security reasons. And but other manufacturing, do you see Africa becoming a bigger player in that at all, or has that come up for you at all? I guess the thing about China is, the infrastructure is there for all of it, and
Mm-hmm.
it's been a manufacturing powerhouse for so long that it is just probably there's just economies of scale there for manufacturing. But as China progresses and the middle class grows and less people are willing to work for these super low wages, do you think that Africa and maybe the Middle East are going to see an increase in manufacturing?
I think eventually, yeah, if we can build the infrastructure out there, because it's all like a race to the bottom, pretty much.
Yeah.
Once a country has too much manufacturing for too long, it gets too expensive to produce there. So I think we will see an attempt to shift. I don't know if it how successful it will be, because I feel like Africa is interesting because there are a few like really developed like countries and cities where you probably couldn't move the manufacturing to because it would be too expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And then I feel like a lot of the other places might be too underdeveloped. Like it would take a lot of
Right.
investment to
Right.
bring more of like the areas that you might be able to do it in
Yeah. And
up to speed.
it just might be more lucrative. I mean, I don't know, right? I'm just kind of talking, but it might be more lucrative to just have the natural resources, the natural resource excavation and things like
Oh, it
that
might,
out
yeah.
there. And yeah, doing the mining out there, which it seems like China has been working on growing their presence in Africa and kind of reaching their arm out over there, and also as well as the Middle East. So it'll be interesting to see the U.S.'s reaction to it. I know that I read a little bit about them doing that with Africa and the Middle East, but I haven't seen much about the U.S.'s involvement there. Um, so that'll be something to look out for. And
Yeah, I haven't heard too much about the US's involvement either. I feel like the US doesn't like to be like the forefront of things like that just because I think they would get a lot of backlash as it being exploitative.
mhm. So we just like to do business with the people that are
Yeah.
making. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we're like, it's already there. We're gonna take advantage of it instead of like going somewhere and be like, all right, we're gonna build 100 factories here.
Gotcha. Yeah, that
But
that that makes sense, and it's just kind of like a it's political.
yeah.
So that's interesting. Here's one other thing that I did also really want to talk to you about, just given, our conversations off the air before,
Mm.
and just knowing a little bit about your opinions on this. So, can you speak a little bit about the economics of healthcare, and then, moreover, what do you think the right approach is to fixing this system? Because I've been working in the system a little bit, as you know, and frankly, I've been seeing how absolutely broken it is, and it's placing an unreasonable amount of stress on the American consumer, and even the programs that are supposed to be working well are incredibly confusing and still incredibly expensive. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on this, and if you have any opinions about how we could maybe go about fixing it.
I think it has to start with regulating like the prices of these things because a lot of it, like, yeah, most people have insurance, so that $10,000 MRI comes down to like 200, but still it's like there's no need for it to cost that much in the first place. And I think that starts with like the government stepping in and saying like, okay, it costs this much to actually give someone an MRI or a surgery. You can those numbers are very easy to figure out the real cost of, and for them to cut out the amount of profit that, although like I don't know, because even like saying that, it sounds kind of wrong to just put a cap on how much profits a company can make. It feels wrong to do that, but at the same time, it feels wrong to me that they're able to just drive the prices up and up and up.
Right. And we've seen caps on certain things like insulin that have
Mm-hmm.
helped, in my opinion, in certain instances. So maybe that's a emblematic of a way to go forward. But do you think companies like, for example, like GoodRx and
Mm-hmm.
Cost Plus Drugs, I believe it's called, the Mark
Yeah, the
Cubans,
Mark Cuban thing.
yeah. So a company that, for example, sells, I don't know GoodRx's business model, but I do know that the cost plus drugs. So what they do is they sell it for what it costs to make, and then they tack on a 15%, um, I guess, fee,
Finder's
or
fee,
whatever
yeah.
you want to call it. So do you think that moving forward, the transparency of that seems to make sense? And what I'm doing, more and more I'm seeing people who can actually get certain drugs for cheaper outside of their own insurance,
Mm-hmm.
using these companies. So do you think that there's a future for something like this in the United States?
I think so, and I think it like at the very least, I think it helps show consumers that like this is how much like insurance companies and your normal healthcare providers are actually making off of you.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at your insurance and like your allergy medications, $300, but they only charge you $80 for it, and then it's $60 over at Mark Cuban's
Mm-hmm.
company, then the consumer internally is like, why does it say 300 on there in the first place? Like, I think it helps the consumer understand just how inflated these prices are, and it makes them question like why. So I think that that's an important aspect of those companies. I hope that they can take off more. I don't think that we're going to see them offering like emergency care and like surgery. I don't think we'll
Yeah.
see them doing complex things just because the insurance liability there is
Mm-hmm.
so high. If
Mm-hmm.
they were to do something wrong,
Right.
Like they could get sued. And so I think that that's going to be the biggest obstacle is that these major health networks just have so much liability money in
Yeah.
case anything goes wrong. So that's going to be the biggest
So,
barrier, in my
so
opinion.
how do you fix that? If, for example, like emergency thing, if I'm having a heart attack, one of the problems with the economics of healthcare is that if I'm having a heart attack and I'm in the back of an ambulance, I can't go shop around
Mm-hmm.
for the most cost effective hospital. And we see things like dermatology or plastic surgery having a cheaper, more functional economy because those are areas where you can go and look, and dental insurance as well, because you have the opportunity to go to different dentists or different dermatologists and shop around and look at the different prices. So is there any fix to the guy that's having a heart attack and then is stuck with a $600,000 bill after he's out of the hospital?
The only the only fix I really see is regulation by the government to say that like to cost that much to charge that much is price gouging to a consumer who a lot of times they aren't able to make the most informed and best decision for their financials because they don't have are incapacitated or
Right.
something like that, like they're a vulnerable
Yeah.
entity in that time. And so I think that putting some more protections for the consumer has to be done. Now, what that is, I don't really know.
Yeah. And I think this is kind of outside of the spectrum of what we would consider kind of normal healthcare, but I think a focus on preventative things is
Mm-hmm.
is going to be very important moving forward, and having testing, and it almost seems preposterous to go to the doctor and they have almost zero data on you as an individual person, and have
Yeah.
them try to make assumptions where they can actually have there's indicators of things that'll happen well before they happen if we would start to have regular blood tests, and even kind of different than regular blood tests. Like if we had a bigger emphasis on eating healthy and exercising, I think that could significantly reduce the cost of healthcare in the United States. I mean, the amount of people that are taking prescription medications for blood pressure and
Mm-hmm.
kind of a lot of these things that are related to obesity and just poor diet and lack of exercise is surprising. So hopefully we are the generation that can break that, because I think the generations before us frankly got lied to by I don't really know who. I think big sugar is a real thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I think they're definitely at fault for over processing our food. But with this information, I think our generation will probably go forward and be more healthy and be better off for it. So I had one more question for you before we head off. This is just kind of a broad question to pick your brain about, just kind of for fun. Um, I kind of want to know where you see America just in a broad sense in 10 years, and on top of that, kind of how you see them situated geopolitically as well.
I think that I don't see that much changing in the next 10 years. I think that the US is still going to have a lot of the problems that we currently have. I don't think that like China overtaking us as the world's largest superpower is, I think that that's kind of overblown by a lot of people. we've been hearing that for a while, and while they are making steps, I don't really see it taking place. I think that China has too many other issues at play. So yeah, I don't see that much changing. I think we're going to be hopefully in a better like political climate than we are now, I mean, culturally, but I don't see a whole lot changing economically in the next 10 years.
Do you see the divisiveness that we're seeing in America subsiding or increasing? Honestly,
I'm kind of torn between it because I think I want to say that, I mean, it's kind of hard to say that it's going to get better, just because we haven't seen it get better once for the past 5 years, 6 years now, even longer, I guess you could say. And but also, I think at a certain point, a lot of people in America are just going to get tired of it. And I think we're starting to see that a little bit. 'Cause I know that I'm just getting tired of a lot of it. So I think
yeah,
that a lot of people, especially like younger people like us, are going to get apathetic towards things like that in a way, which I don't think is necessarily a good thing because if we're apathetic towards politics, then that's how things get swept under the rug and things like
right. Well, thank you so much, man. I really
that. Yeah,
appreciate it and taking the time to do this with me when I'm
of
just starting
course.
out. It means a lot. So I
Yeah,
really
of
appreciate it.
course. I'd love to come back sometime.
All right, man. Have a good rest of your night.
You too. Love you. Bye.
Love you too. Bye.